Today, I'll show you how to delete some records from a SQL Server database using a package called Blazored Modal. This will all be done in Blazor Server in .NET Core. The code is down in the description, so let's get coding. Okay, so the very first thing that we need to do is to install that package that I told you in the beginning called Blazored Modal. And a model is just another term for a pop-up. And I know for a fact that we need this because when we delete a record, we don't just want to click a button and delete it. We want to actually confirm with the client/user that we actually want to delete that entry, because it might just be an error. It might just have been a mistake, the fact that they clicked the delete button, and we want to ensure that. So that's why we will be implementing in the first part of this tutorial a model. And I'm gonna link you up obviously in the description of this video with a link to this GitHub repo, but it's basically it's basically a pretty simple component. So I will go ahead and install this right now. If we open up the project, as we've left it off last time, by the way, if you're new to this, this is the 7th part in this Blazor tutorial in Visual Studio 2019 series, and obviously all the code is in the description. The code exactly like this one is in the before folder, so go ahead. I've posted it on my GitHub and it's completely free to download, so just go ahead and do that so you're up to speed to what we're doing here. Okay, so if we expand the recipe manager project and if we go to the dependencies, right click, manage new get packages, we're gonna type in Blazored Modal. Okay, and the latest stable version is 6.0.1. I'm just gonna go ahead and install that, accept licenses. Okay. And I think that's pretty much done. I'm just gonna stuck those in there. Okay, so that's part 1. Part 2 is very important, to save the project, because when we're gonna go ahead and run this, it will throw an error. It won't find the dependencies. Please make sure that you click on the recipe manager and save. Control S, Control S, Control S. It's very important. I think it took me about 10 minutes to figure this out. But yeah. And then the next thing that we want to do is to register the Blazored Modal, the new package, into the configure services method inside startup.cs. So that's in the root of your recipe manager project. Double click on startup.cs, scroll down until you see a method called configure services, and then at the bottom of this method type in services.add Blazored Modal. That's it, and it's not going to recognize it obviously, but if you press Control dot, then add that using Blazored Modal at the very top, somewhere here. Yep. And that should sort you out. Okay, the next thing real quick that we need to do is to add a couple of imports into _imports.razor. So that's in the same directory in the root project. Okay, and then in here I'm just gonna copy and paste it. Obviously all the instructions are on the GitHub page, but in essence, we're adding the Blazor.modal using here, and then Blazor.modal.services. So we need to be able to use these services. So these two lines are very important. Otherwise, we'll have to add those couple of usings, these two ones. We'll have to add them to every single page that we're going to be working with Blazor Modal, and we don't want that. Hence why we're doing it here. Okay. And then following, we need to add a cascading Blazored Modal component in app.razor. In the same directory, open up app.razor. And then in here, we're going to add a tag that's basically wrapping the router element. So this is the tag / component, obviously. And then let's go ahead and close this. And what this is doing is basically it's wrapping the entire, as you can see, it's wrapping the entire the entire application with this cascading Blazored model. That way, when it comes to actually using it, we will only be passing a cascading parameter inside our pages and components to be able to make use of the Blazored model. So we won't have to instantiate it all the time. You'll see what I mean in a moment. Okay, following, we need to reference the style sheet for the Blazored model, because that's got its own style, as well as the JavaScript file in underscore hosts.c#html. So that's inside pages underscore host.html, and then I'm gonna quickly copy and paste that in there. So I'm gonna paste that just above the Blazored toast, and then at the bottom of the page, we'll add the Blazored model JavaScript. And then for the very last step, in order to be able to use the model service, we go in our very first page that we're gonna be using this component, and we'll need to add that cascading parameter that I told you about a couple of moments ago. So that's going to be in here in the recipe details. So let's just do a cascading parameter I model of type I model service, and then call it model. Obviously, this is a property, so it's gonna have a getter and a setter, the default ones, obviously. So that's it with this step. That's it. Please make sure that you've done every step exactly like I've shown you here, so that it can ensure that this actually works from your first try. It's very important, because it could be a pain to debug through this. Okay, following, we need to actually we need to build a component, because this is not as easy as just showing a model. A pop-up model with, are you sure you want to do this, yes or no? We are going to be to have to build that component. Okay, so inside pages, so expand the recipe manager project, expand the pages folder, and inside here let's create a new folder called components. Okay, and then inside this components folder, we need to add a new Razor component called confirmation model. You can call this, again, you can call this whatever you want, confirmation model. Okay, and then in here, obviously I'm not going to be typing anything because I don't want to bore you with all the details, but it goes without saying that I will be going through every single line. So one thing that I want to show you, so that it makes it easier for you in the future to debug through these sorts of components, is that you can actually add a page directive to your components, just like this. So page, and then I'm gonna set that to model. Okay, and what this allows you to do is actually, instead of say you want to pass in some parameters here, then instead of having to reference that inside one of your pages, then you can just navigate to the root URL of your application / and then whatever the page root is, and this will allow you to just debug and see in real time in Blazor how your component looks like before even using it. So that's a nice little trick for you. In here, what we want to do is basically make a simple bootstrap layout with a question, are you sure you want to do this? And a couple of buttons, yes or no, or yes or cancel. Yes will obviously call the recipe service and delete that entry, that recipe, and then no or cancel, whatever we decide to call it, will cancel the model and will get us back to the original page, or we'll just close the pop-up altogether. Okay, first thing to do is to inject the iRecipe service. Inject iRecipe service, call it recipe service. Of course, we need to add the using using services, because that's the namespace. Okay, so we're all sorted. And then in here, I'm going to add a div container. So let's remove this for now. And then I'm going to add a div class and then container. And then I'm going to align everything to the center. And then in here, the first row will be, so a div class row, div class column, and then the question. Are you sure you want to delete this recipe? Obviously, for a bigger application, you would want this question to be a parameter and then to set this question from outside the component. But for the time being, this will do the trick. And then just another row. Let's add a margin top of 3, and then inside here, a div class call and text center as well. Okay, and then in here, I'm gonna paste in a couple of buttons and walk you through them. So the first one, let's get rid of that one. So the first one is a button with a class of BTN danger. So it's gonna be red according to Bootstrap, because we're using Bootstrap here. And then it's got a non-click. This is what it's important, right? Because this I class fast trash PR2, this is basically just adding an icon, and it's called yes. The button has got the value of yes. Sorry, the text of yes. And then it's got a non-click event bound to it that's asynchronously calling a method called delete recipe. Now, mind you, this method doesn't exist yet. We are going to create it as part of this confirmation model. So that's it with this button. It's just the yes button that will delete the actual recipe. And then that's the confirmation that we want from the user that this action hasn't been a mistake. And then the second one is the cancel button. And this is important because we want to allow them the chance to revert their action in case this is a mistake. So what this is doing is, again, this is BTN secondary with a margin top, margin right of 3, so that it's a bit of margin between the buttons. And then it's got a non-click event that's bound to it. That's asynchronously calling the model instance .cancel async. So this model instance, we're going to have to pass that in as a cascading parameter in this component as well. So that's it. These are these two buttons so far. Following, we need to configure the code section. We need to pass in a few things. So we need to pass in the recipe ID, because obviously we're going to be calling the recipe service and be deleting the recipe that's been requested to be deleted. And then secondly, and probably equally as important, is we want to be able to pass in the Blazored Modal instance as a cascading parameter. So let's just do that. So cascading parameter Blazored Modal instance, and call it model instance, right? And then this is a property as well, so get set. Okay, and then following a normal parameter, that's public int recipe ID. And of course, this has got a getter and a setter. Okay. So I called mine recipe ID. Keep that in mind because in a few moments, I'll show you why this is important. Not necessarily the fact that I called it recipe ID, but the fact that I remember how I call it. And you'll see why. Okay. And then we've got a method here that's not declared yet. So let's just declare it. So private async. This needs to be asynchronous, task, and then delete recipe. This doesn't take in any parameters. Okay, and then in here, what we'll do in a moment, not now, because we need to do something else beforehand, delete the recipe. And after we delete the recipe, we don't need the model anymore, so we need to close it. So await model instance .close async. We need to wait for that as well. One thing that I want to stress is the difference between model instance.cancel async and model instance.close async. What cancel is that when you've got a confirmation model, you either confirm, press yes, or cancel the action. When you cancel something, it means you're going back, you've changed your mind, you don't want to confirm anymore. However, when you're closing, it's not the same thing as canceling. You haven't changed your mind. We're doing this automatically after we've deleted. So when we're closing, we're actually just dismissing the model. We've finished. We want to terminate the model. We want to delete the instance. That's it. Not the instance. We don't want to delete the instance, but we just want to remove it from the view. It's not the same thing. This is not something that the user does. This is something that that the application does automatically. You'll see what I mean in just a second. Okay, so the next step is, if we go to recipe details, we need to show the confirmation model before deleting it, before deleting the recipe. Okay, so in the previous video, we've added a delete button right here as with a class of btn danger and float right. And I think the best thing that we need to do now is to open up the package manager console and really quick run the app. So to do that, we're gonna type in .NET watch run and then -p or -- project is the same thing. And then let's switch to the recipe manager as the default project to be the recipe manager, and then /p -p and then the project would be recipe manager. So let's hit enter. Okay, this is fully loaded. Okay, howdy, recent recipes. If we go to the page and we choose a recipe, then we are here. So this is the delete button, and obviously currently it doesn't do anything. And this is up to us to make this, to be configured this. So this is what it looks like. But what I also wanted to show you is the model page. So if we go to /model, this is it. So this is what it looks like, right? So that's pretty cool. So you don't actually need anything in order to be able to see this. Worst case scenario, if you've not got access to any sort of third-party library to show a pop-up model, you can actually redirect the users to a /confirmation model page, such as this one. And you can do exactly the same steps as we've done before without the references, obviously, to the Blazored Modal package. And if the user presses yes, then obviously it's going to throw an error now, but you know what I mean. Then delete the recipe and redirect them back to whatever the page was. And then if they press cancel, redirect them back to the details page. That's as easy as doing that. But we're not going to do that, obviously. So in order to do that, we need to really quick add an onclick event to this button. So let's find the button. This is the delete button. And then in here, space, add onclick. Onclick, and then equal, and then open close parentheses, and then open close parentheses again to signify an anonymous function. And then this will be asynchronous. After I finish typing, that's probably your time to pause and to carry on typing if I'm going too fast. Okay. And then await. And then show confirmation model. And this is a method that we are going to create an asynchronous method. So whenever this button is clicked, show confirmation model. Let's go ahead and implement this function at the bottom of our code block. So we are here. This is the code block. Why is it indented? I don't know. Okay, at the bottom of our code block, we define a method called show confirmation model. But this is going to be a private async task, and then show confirmation model. That's the name of the function. And in here, this is what we want to do. In essence, we want to show the confirmation model. However, there are a few steps that we need to undertake before that. So remember this recipe ID parameter, yes, we need to pass that in, and it's important to copy the name of it, because we're gonna specify the name of the parameter inside double quotes. So we are gonna tell Blazored Modal what's the name of the parameter that we're gonna be passing in. So if we do var parameters equals to new model parameters, okay, here we do parameters.add, and then in here, if we go back here, copy the parameter that we want to pass in. So that's, in our case, that's recipe ID, comma, and then the actual value. So in this case, the recipe details has got a parameter called ID. That's a valid parameter, obviously. And then in here, we define another parameter called confirmation model. Yep. And then we define that by calling model dot show. And then in here, we inside this this brackets, we put in the name of the component. So that's confirmation model. It's probably not recognizing it because we need to add the usings at the top, but bear with me. Okay, and then in here we need to add a title that's going to appear on the top of the pop-up. So that title is delete recipe. It's a question. You can put that to whatever you want, but I'm just going to leave it at that. Parameters, and then pass in the parameters. So we are showing the model, passing in a question and the parameters, and storing that in a confirmation model. And then it's important to store that in a confirmation model variable, because we are going to need the result, and the result is another variable that we declare, and it's equal to await confirmation model dot result. That's it. Okay, so far what we've done is we've defined a parameters member of this function, and then we've added a new parameter, which is the recipe ID, and we need to pass that recipe ID into our confirmation model, because we're going to be using that inside here, inside the delete recipe in a moment. And then we have called the show function, passing in the type of component, the component, and then with the question and the parameters, and then we are storing the result in a variable that we've accessed by saying confirmation model dot result. I hope everything makes sense. Please let me know in the comments below. By the way, if you do enjoy this video so far, please make sure that you hit that like button down below, because it really helps a lot and it pushes up this tutorial to as many people as possible. I do appreciate it. And also I post weekly videos just like this one every Saturday. So if you're interested in this, consider subscribing so you don't miss out on anything that I post. Okay, back to the tutorial. So I hope this all makes sense, and if you do have questions, please let them in the comment section below. I promise I'll answer to every single one of them. In here, as I said before, we need to check if the model has been cancelled. In other words, if this cancel async method has been called. Okay, so that's as easy as doing result.cancelled, but we put a not before it, because we want to check if it's not been cancelled. Because if it's not been cancelled, it means that the yes button has been clicked, right? So in here, let's add a toaster service, show success, with a message of your recipe has been deleted. Yep. And then let's navigate to the recipes list. So we do that by going /recipes, or not even with a slash. It's the same thing anyway. Okay. The last thing that we need to do is to add that using at the top. So I think that's using components. Okay. So that's gonna, okay, cool. Let's give this a try. Obviously it's not going to delete the recipe because we haven't implemented the deletion logic yet. That's the very last step. Let's click the delete button. And there you go. We've got the model popping up. If we press cancel, we expect this to go away. Okay. If we press X, this is not defined by us, but more is defined. It's built in. If we press X, it's gonna cancel async as well. So it's the same thing. Cancel or X, it's gonna cancel async, right? So this is what we're worried about right now. It's the yes. That's the last step. Obviously, it's not being deleted. It's just because, as you can see it here, it's just redirecting. So let's implement the yes. That's the last step. Okay, so we go back to the confirmation model. Actually, let's just close down all the other files that we don't need anymore. Okay, so instead of this comment, we need to call the recipe service dot delete, passing in the recipe ID. Okay, that's it. But this won't work because this method is not implemented. Okay, so the way we implement it is by grabbing first the recipe ID, checking if it exists. Then if it does, we delete it. Okay, so those are the quick steps that we need to undertake. So we declare a local variable inside this function, recipe equals to db.recipes.find, and then we pass in the ID. Okay, and then we check if this recipe is not null. In other words, if this exists, if we found something, then we call the remove method on the db context. Sorry, not recipes, db.remove. Yep, passing in the object that we found, recipe. And then, very important, db.save changes. That's it. That's what we need to do. Okay, going back in here, keep in mind, I can't remember exactly the ID of this recipe, but we're going to go back to the list. So in here, recipe for ID 26, go ahead, press delete, confirm, say yes, and there you go. We haven't got the recipe 26 anymore. Recipe 3 with the ID of 25, delete. Oh, I've changed my mind. Well, actually, let's just delete it. Yes, there you go. We haven't got recipe 3 with the ID of 25. We feel like we're going to be deleting this one as well. Let's go ahead and delete it. And there you go. This is how to delete some records using Blazored Modal in Blazor Server in .NET Core. Okay, so this is it for today's tutorial. I truly hope that you have enjoyed it, and if you did, please make sure that you hit that like button. If you didn't, please leave your suggestions in the comment section down below, or any questions, and I'll make sure to respond to every single one of them. I post weekly videos just like this one, or discussions about .NET in general every Saturday, so if you do like content like this, please consider subscribing so you don't miss anything from me. Until next time, stay safe.